There's a smell that pulls you back before you've even worked out what it is. Nobody taught you that. You didn't decide to react that way. Almost everything alive reacts the same. A fish, a cockroach, a pill bug, you. The smell of decay works like an alarm, and it only ever points one direction. Get away. Don't come closer. Something here can kill you. So explain the animals that stay. The ones that don't leave for 10 days straight, fighting off coyotes. The ones that carry their dead on their heads for 1,000 miles. The ones that stop sleeping in the spot where somebody died, even after the body is gone and there's no smell left at all. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where the line runs between what you do and what they do. The line is real, but it doesn't run where you think it does, and it's a lot thinner than you'd like. If you want the behavior in nature that looks most like a burial rite, you won't find it in elephants or apes. You'll find it in ants. A colony handles death by procedure. A dead worker doesn't get left where she fell. The others pick her up, carry her down the tunnels, and take her outside the nest to a separate pile. Scientists name this necrophoresis. The term was coined in the late 1950s by Edward Wilson, a man who knew more about ants than anyone alive. He's also the one who took the magic out of it. Wilson worked out that ants don't see death, they smell it. Decomposing tissue releases fatty acids, mainly oleic acid. So he took a living, healthy ant and dabbed a little of that acid on it. Her nestmates picked her up and carried her to the garbage pile. Alive. She struggled the whole way. They dumped her anyway. She walked back into the nest, and they grabbed her and hauled her out again. And again, until she'd finally cleaned herself off. It works in reverse, too. Ants will often ignore a fresh corpse for about 2 days. Until the acids build up, that ant isn't dead as far as the colony is concerned. The body doesn't get to decide it has died. The chemistry on its surface decides. Then it gets worse for the romantics. In the 1990s, David Rollo at McMaster University showed that the same acids repel cockroaches. Then it turned out pill bugs react the same way. Insects and crustaceans split off from each other on the evolutionary tree more than 400 million years ago, and they share the same marker for death. It isn't learned. That molecule has been working as an alarm signal for longer than forests have existed on this planet. So the first honest answer is simple. These aren't funerals. It's a sanitation response to a smell, and there is no grief anywhere in it. The problem is that chemistry explains beautifully why an animal hauls its dead away. It explains nothing about the ones who stay. If you live in a city, there's almost certainly a crow watching you. And crows have a reputation. People say they hold real funerals for their dead. That reputation came out of a genuine experiment. Kaylee Swift and John Marsleff at the University of Washington spent years walking around Seattle in masks, holding a taxidermied dead crow. Every single time, the same thing happened. Birds came in, started screaming, and gathered over the body by the dozen. It looked like a wake. The press wrote it up that way. Then Swift published the results in 2015 and explained what she'd actually seen. The crows weren't mourning, they were memorizing. About 70% of them refused to touch the body at all. What they did instead was lock in the place and the face. A feeder sitting next to a corpse got avoided for weeks. The person in the mask who had held the dead crow got recognized and harassed for months. To a crow, a dead crow isn't a body. It's writing on the wall. One of ours died here, find out who did it, and stay away. Swift has been correcting reporters who call it a funeral ever since. And she has better reasons than modesty. Later in the work, it turned out that in roughly 1 case out of 15, crows treated the body of their own kind very differently. They pecked at it, fought over it, and some of them tried to mate with it. So here too, it's chemistry plus learning. A smart, useful, completely heartless mechanism. Death as a source of information about risk. You could close the case there. Except for one detail. Everything we've covered so far points the same direction the video started in. Leave. Remove the body, avoid the place, remember the threat. But there are animals that do the exact opposite when death shows up. They stay. Sometimes it costs them their lives. In 2017, an 8-year-old boy from Arizona named Dante DeCourt was putting together a school science fair project. A female peccary had died near his house. A peccary is a small hoofed animal, something like a pig, that lives in herds. Dante set up a trail camera by the body to see what would come and eat it. Her herd came. The camera ran for 10 days. That whole time, 5 peccaries kept returning to the body. They nosed it, they bit it, They pushed their snouts under her side and tried to lift her, over and over, like they were checking whether she'd get up. They lay down and slept pressed against her. They came by day and by night, and almost two-thirds of the visits were after dark. Then the coyotes showed up. The peccaries didn't leave. They charged and drove them off. And they did it again the next night, and the night after that, until on day 10, the coyotes finally got what they came for. Dante sent the footage to a biologist named Mariana Altrichter, and the observation was published in the scientific journal Ethology. The author was 8 years old. Look at what doesn't add up here. A corpse in the Arizona heat is a concentrated source of exactly the molecules any sane animal should be running from. It's an infection risk and a predator magnet at the same time. Staying near it is a bad deal on every single measure. And defending it from coyotes is a direct risk of dying yourself, for someone who can't be helped anymore. That herd paid the bill for 10 days straight. Chemistry doesn't fit. Learning doesn't fit either, because the peccaries weren't extracting any useful information about danger. They were manufacturing the danger. But the skeptics have a strong argument, and it deserves to be said out loud, because it's an honest one. Maybe the peccaries simply didn't understand that she was dead. Maybe they saw a herd member who had lain down for some reason and wasn't getting up, and they behaved exactly as they always do. Stay close, stand guard, wait. And that holds up perfectly until you ask what an animal actually has to understand in order to understand death. The philosopher Susana Monceau at UNED in Madrid has spent years on the question biologists kept walking around. Not, does the animal grieve, but what exactly has to be in its head before we can say it understood? Her answer turned out to be surprisingly modest. 2 things are enough. The first is non-functionality, grasping that this body no longer does what living things do. It won't get up, it won't answer, it won't run. The second is irreversibility, grasping that this isn't a pause. It won't get up later either. That's it. No immortal soul, no ritual, no awareness of your own mortality. A minimum concept of death doesn't require any of that. And Monceau's conclusion is a lot more unsettling than it first sounds. If the bar is that low, then understanding death should be widespread in nature. We were just looking for the wrong thing. We were looking for creatures that understand death the way we do, and missing the ones that understand it their own way. Her test is simple. If an animal expects something from a body and then stops expecting it, that animal crossed the line. If it waits forever, it didn't. The peccaries pushed their snouts under her side for 10 days, and then coyotes ended it. We'll never know when they would have stopped on their own, but there are cases where the count wasn't in days, and where the bond with the dead could actually be measured. In 2003, a respiratory epidemic swept through the chimpanzee population in the forest at Bossou in Guinea. Infants died. The primatologist Dora Biro at Oxford documented what happened next, and it's one of the hardest papers to read in her field. A female named Jire carried the body of her dead infant for 68 days. Not hours, days. In the tropical heat, the body mummified, dried out, and lost its hair, and she carried it anyway. She groomed it. She waved the flies off it. She built a night nest and laid it down beside her. When other chimps tried to take the body, she fought them off. A second female, Vua Vua, carried hers for 19 days. Earlier, in 1992, that same Jire had carried a different infant for at least 27. The first explanation that comes to mind is physiological, and it's a reasonable one. Hormones. Motherhood doesn't switch off on command. The milk keeps coming, the oxytocin keeps working, and the mother's body simply never got the message that there's nobody left to carry. She isn't grieving, she's running out the program. In 2021, Alicia Carter's team at University College London tested that against the entire body of evidence at once. They pulled together everything ever published on the subject, 126 scientific papers, 409 documented cases, 50 primate species, and they asked one question: what determines how long a mother carries the body? It turned out the mothers who carry longest are the ones whose bond with the infant was strongest. The younger the infant was when it died, the longer she holds on, and the duration drops off sharply right around the age when weaning begins. Honestly, hormones explain that just as well, since a younger infant means more active lactation. Carter says so herself. But now, there's a second variable that works at least as well as the first, and its name is the strength of the relationship. And relationships, unlike lactation, can be checked in a place where there's no milk involved at all. In the Okavango Delta in Botswana, Anne Eng, working with Dorothy Cheney and Robert Seyfarth, spent years measuring stress hormones in wild baboons. When a female lost a close relative to a predator, the glucocorticoid levels in her body spiked, a measurable biological trace of loss. Then came the interesting part. The bereaved female started widening her social circle. She groomed animals she'd barely interacted with before, including some well below her in rank. And within a few weeks, her hormones came back down to normal. A baboon has no grave and no words. But she has a loss. The loss has a biochemistry, and that biochemistry has a treatment. Other baboons. Which raises the next question. Everything we've looked at is a bond between two individuals, mother and child, sister and sister, a closed circuit. A funeral, by definition, is a group event. Someone dies, and the behavior of everyone else changes. That got filmed too, once, by accident. November 2008, Blair Drummond Safari Park in Scotland. A female chimpanzee named Pansy is dying. She's in her 50s. There were cameras over the enclosure, and the primatologist James Anderson later went through the footage second by second. In her final minutes, the three other chimps didn't leave her side. They stroked her, groomed her, touched her face. The intensity of their care spiked that specific evening, as if they knew where this was going. The moment she stopped breathing, they started testing her. They leaned down over her face. They lifted her limbs and let them drop. They watched to see what would happen. That's Monceau's first condition playing out in real time. They were finding out whether this body still worked. Her adult daughter Rosie stayed with the body all night. She sat by her mother for hours, in the dark, doing nothing. And in the morning, the part that's hardest for a skeptic to explain began. For days, the group was subdued. They ate less, barely played, went noticeably quiet, and they stopped using the platform where Pansy had died. It was their favorite place to sleep. The body was long gone. There was no smell left, and there was nothing dangerous there. They just never lay down there again. Smell drives an animal away from a body. Here there was no body, and they avoided the spot anyway. There was nothing left to react to except the memory. There's a similar story with no family death in it at all. At the Chimfunshi Sanctuary in Zambia, a female named Noelle had adopted a 9-year-old male, Thomas, after his mother died. When Thomas died, Noelle walked over to the body, pulled off a stem of grass, and started cleaning his teeth with it. Carefully, with total concentration, for several minutes, while the rest of the group stood around gone quiet. A dead chimpanzee has no use for clean teeth. Nobody gains anything from it. Edwin van Leeuwen, who described the case in 2017, put it briefly: humans are not the only species capable of compassion. His colleagues countered that this could just be a chimp reacting to a group mate who suddenly stopped moving. Both readings are still on the table. And this is where we have to stop and say the thing that makes everything else honest. The science here is young and uneven. It only became its own discipline, evolutionary thanatology, in 2018, and it has a defect built into it. What gets published is what moves people. The thousands of cases where an animal walked past its own dead without breaking stride never make it into a journal because there's nothing to write about. Most deaths in nature produce no reaction whatsoever, and sometimes the reaction is the kind nobody makes a documentary about. In 2013, in Senegal, in the Fongoli community, a group of male chimpanzees killed their deposed leader, a male named Fuduko, and spent hours mutilating his body. They ate part of him. All of this is true at the same time. The chimp who sits with her mother's body all night and the chimps who eat their rival's body are the same species. Worse, the line is hard to draw even inside our own species. The most famous evidence for the first burial in history is the Neanderthal flower burial at Shanidar Cave, found in the 1960s. Pollen around the body, as if someone had covered it in flowers. Today that pollen is mostly attributed to rodents and burrowing bees. In 2023, the paleoanthropologist Lee Berger announced that the small-brained Homo naledi had been burying its dead 250,000 years ago. His colleagues answered with a paper whose title set it straight. There's no scientific evidence for it. Even with our own ancestors, telling someone laid them there, apart from they ended up there, is extraordinarily hard. So grief in animals is real, and that's no longer the argument. What's still missing anywhere is a right, something organized, repeatable, and the same every time. It was missing until February of 2024. You've heard the big myth about elephants, that somewhere out there is an elephant graveyard, a secret place they go to die. Forget it. No such place exists. The myth grew out of bones piling up near watering holes and out of one very real, well-documented oddity. Elephants really do stop at bones. In 2006, Karen McComb tested this at Amboseli in Kenya. Elephants were offered a choice between the bones and skulls of different animals, ivory, and pieces of wood. They picked their own, every time. An elephant skull, and above all a tusk, held their attention more than anything else. But that same study has a second, much less quoted half. They did not single out the skull of their own dead matriarch from the skulls of strangers. What pulls them is the species, not necessarily the individual. Now, February of 2024, an Indian forest officer, Parveen Kaswan, and a researcher from Pune, Akashdeep Roy, publish a paper on northern Bengal, tea plantation country, where Asian elephants live. 5 dead calves, all between 3 months and a year old, all of them dying in 2022 and 2023, were found in irrigation ditches. All 5 covered with soil, head, trunk, and back buried, legs sticking straight up, all 5 the same way. Around the sites, there were the tracks of 15 to 20 elephants, including young ones. The whole herd was involved. Night guards on the plantation said the herds would call out for 30 to 40 minutes before leaving. None of the sites was anywhere near human housing. Nobody filmed it happening. It's a single paper, nobody has replicated it yet, and it needs to be handled carefully. But the position repeated 5 times, and coincidence doesn't behave like that. It's the closest thing to a right anyone has found in nature. Collective, expensive, useless for survival, and identical every time. And it still isn't the thing you do. Because where an elephant needs a hole in the ground, there are creatures with nowhere to put their dead at all. In the summer of 2018, off the coast of Washington state, a killer whale from the southern resident population, known to researchers as J35, gave birth. Her daughter lived about half an hour. The mother wouldn't let the body sink. She carried it on her head. A dead body slips constantly in the water, so she nudged it back up with her nose, again and again, every time it started to go under. Every time she dove after it, she lost ground. She barely hunted. She did this for 17 days. In that time, her group covered roughly 1,000 miles. That's about the distance from Seattle to Los Angeles. And her group didn't move on without her. They slowed down and stayed with her the entire time. They gave her a name, Tahlequah. What she did got called the Tour of Grief. On the 17th day, she let the body go and returned to a normal life. For the next 7 years, she lived like any other killer whale. She hunted, she raised a son. At the end of December 2024, Tahlequah gave birth again. The calf was designated J61. She lived about a week. On the 31st of December, Tahlequah was seen off the shore of Seattle. She was holding her daughter's body on her head, pushing it up with her nose, keeping the ocean from taking it. Researchers estimated the body weighed around 300 pounds. She carried it for more than 11 days. She did it twice. Once, you can put down to hormones. 17 days, you can put down to a body that never got the message. But 7 years passed between the two. She lived the first one all the way through, let go, went back to her life, and raised a child. She knew from her own experience how this ends and what it costs, and she put her head under him again. Animals don't have funerals in the human sense. There's no rite passed down through generations, no symbol, no headstone, no words spoken over a body. That line is real, and it's ours. But everything underneath the rite is already there. Understanding that the one who was here doesn't answer anymore. The willingness to stay when staying costs you. The willingness to pay for it in food, in risk, and in time. And the pattern that the closer you were, the longer you hold on. Every year, entire countries empty out into their cemeteries. In Poland, it happens on the 1st of November. Millions of candles in a single evening, highways at a standstill, a whole nation standing next to its dead for a few hours. No animal on this planet does anything like that, and in that we really are alone. But what makes you drive halfway across a state to a stone with nobody under it isn't culture. It's the same thing that made a whale, 7 years later, put her head back under a dead child. We just found a shape for it. She carried him 1,000 miles because there was nowhere to put him down.